Hi everyone, I'm Bia, and welcome back to Cardiac Radio for Teens. For those of you who don't know, Cardiac Radio for Teens is a place where teens can come together with other teens to learn about Spiritism teachings and topics in a way that makes more sense and is more applicable to teenagers in today's society. Recently, we've been reading through the Gospel according to Spiritism, and we read through the introduction, and now after the introduction, we're up to the part, the real chapters of the book. And how this book works is it gives one of Jesus' teachings from the Bible and explains that with more to make it clearer using Spiritism that we now have. So before, it was just this vague statement that Jesus said, and a lot of people interpreted it differently. And now with Spiritism, we can go and better understand these teachings that Jesus brought to us. So chapter 3, in my Father's house are many mansions. So that's the topic of this chapter. And then the first part here is the part that Jesus says this, the quote that Jesus says this. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going to prepare a place for you. If I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, so that where I am, you may also be. And this in the section of the Bible, it's in the section of John, chapter 14, 1-3. So we're going to take this quote and see what he meant by, in my Father's house there are many mansions. And we're gonna break that down. The different states of the soul in its spiritual wanderings. So number 2, right? And we know that in this Gospel according to Spiritism, little sections are kind of numbered just so that it's easier to find. Just so if you're talking to someone, you'll be like, oh, in chapter 3, section 2, it said this. But it's not by paragraph or by sentence, it's just little sections have different numbers. So this section is the different states of the soul in its spiritual wandering. The house of the Father is the universe. The different mansions are the worlds that circulate in infinite space and offer the Spirit who incarnates on them dwelling places corresponding to their progress. So right there, he cleared that up. They said the many mansions that he's talking about is that there's many worlds, right? We're not alone. It's not just Earth in our solar system. It's not just Earth in the galaxy that has in the universe that has spirits populating it, right? It's all over. And by these mansions, he means there are all these other planets that also have populations of spirits. Apart from the diversity of the different worlds, the word of Jesus also refers to the fortunate or wretched state of the soul in the spirit world. Conforming to whether the soul is more or less purified and detached from material ties, the ambient in which it finds itself will vary infinitely in the aspect of things, in the sense it feels, and in its perception it has. While some cannot leave the ambient where they live, others raise themselves and travel to other worlds and all over space. While guilty wander in darkness, there are others who have earned happiness, and these rejoice in a state of shining brightness, while they contemplate the sublime speck of the great infinity. Finally, while inferior spirits are tormented by remorse and grief, frequently isolated without consolation, separated from those who were the object of their affection, and punished by the iron gauntlet of moral suffering, the just spirit, together with those he loves, enjoys the delight of many indescribable happiness. Also, in that sense, there are many mansions, although they are not circumscribed or localized. So here there's a couple ways that we can interpret these different mansions. So one of them is that we know that different planets have different spirits, right? They inhabit different spirits. But the other way we can look at it is the difference in spirit worlds. And we know that the spirit world's kind of one thing, but depending on what level of evolution, what vibration we're at, we're going to be kind of lumped in different sections. If we've done a lot to improve ourselves and we keep improving, we'll be at a better place in the spirit world, and we'll be able to travel more and see more things and learn more. But if we did a lot of wrong and we're going to be stubborn, then we're going to be in a negative place, right? And that's not really a specific place, we know. And the spirit world is not a specific place, but it's like in the spirit world, there's different like communities or people joined together by their vibration, by their level of evolution, or by the things they've done wrong. Maybe if they need to go through something alone, it's kind of more of a state of mind, right? So they feel like they're in this place that they're all alone, but it's not a specific place that they go. It's not like heaven or hell, right? It's not two distinct places, but it's more of the mindset of the spirit. So they're saying that could also go into play with when he's talking about different mansions, like the different places that you can be in the spirit world according to just your mindset and how far evolved you are. Now the next section is titled The Different Categories of Inhabited Worlds. So now we're going to talk about, so these planets that we're talking about that have spirits on them, what are the different categories of them? As a result of spirit teaching, we know that the condition of the various worlds differ from the other with respect to a degree of elevation or inferiority of their inhabitants. Among these are those inferior to the inhabitants of Earth, both physically and morally. There are some of the same category, and yet others which are more or less superior in every aspect. In the inferior worlds is all material. Passions are sovereign, and morality is almost nil. As souls progress, material influences diminish to such an extent that in the elevated world, life is by way of saying all spiritual. So here they're saying there's different categories. There's worlds that are not evolved at all, and like they're saying they're everything they think about is material. Their passions are sovereign. Their morality is like nothing. It's like not there at all. Then there's worlds that are kind of in the middle. So like Earth is one of those worlds that are kind of in the middle. You know, there's some people trying to get ahead, but we're still very stuck in material things. And then there's worlds that are very evolved, and like they said, the ones that are super evolved, basically that life is just completely spiritual, because once we go evolving, we get less and less attached to the material world. And once we get less and less attached to material things, then we need less material bodies, right? So in more elevated worlds, they don't have these heavy corporeal bodies that we have, because we're still very material on Earth. So there's also other ones like us, just because it's not going to be like, oh, everyone that's like us is on Earth. No, there's other planets that are the equivalents of Earth as well. So there's ones that are the same as Earth, there's ones that are less evolved, and there's many that are way more evolved than Earth. And then it continues. In the intermediate worlds, good is mixed with evil. On the other, one or the other predominating, according to the degree of advancement of the majority of the inhabitants in any one locality. Although it is not possible to make an absolute classification of all the different worlds, we can at least divide them in general terms by virtue of the state in which they are in, and the destiny they bring with them. Based on the most predominant feature upon each planet, we may surmise the following in a general manner. Primitive worlds, destined to receive the initial incarnation of the human soul. Worlds of tests and atonements, where evil predominates. Regenerating worlds, where souls who still have to atone may absorb new strengths by resisting from the fatigue of fighting. The blessed worlds, where goodness outweighs evil. And finally, celestial or divine worlds, inhabited by purified spirits, where only goodness exists. Earth belongs to the category of worlds of tests and atonements, which is why mankind lives encompassed by such misery. So here they're going to say, so intermediate worlds, right? And they're intermediate. They have a mix of good and evil. And according to their advancement, and it's according to the advancement of the people, right? That you can see, you can kind of understand what level that planet's at. And so then they kind of brought a general classification of the planets. And of course, within these categories, there's different like stages as well. But these are general categories. So the first they said are primitive worlds. So these first worlds are the ones that the spirit is going to it's going to take the first incarnation. So when the spirits are very material, not evolved at all, very primitive basically. So these first incarnations are going to be in primitive worlds right in the beginning. Then they'll move on to tests and atonements. So that's when we start going through trials, and we start going through difficulties and trying to get better and improve ourselves and learning as we go, but we're still making big mistakes. And in these worlds, evil is still predominant. So evil is still the most. Evil is still the most over the good. And as it says down here in the bottom, it says that Earth is one of these worlds. We're in the test and atonements, where evil predominates. And so as you can see, Earth is not very evolved. But one good news is there is a footnote at the bottom of here that says, Kardec wrote this in 1863. Today we understand that Earth has begun to enter the phase of regenerating worlds. And this was a note that was written in 2003, that footnote. So at the time that Kardec wrote this book, or wrote down this book, he said the spirit said that we were in tests and atonements, but now we're actually moving on to the regenerating world phase. So that means we're going up a little level of worlds here. So now the regenerating worlds are where the souls still have atonements, but they start fighting that and they start doing more, right? So kind of like in tests and atonements, there's a lot of tests, but we're still struggling through so many of them. But now in regenerating worlds, we're fighting these challenges that we have more. And then after that, there's the blessed worlds, where goodness outweighs evil. So there's still some evil, but the goodness overpowers that. And then finally, there's the celestial and divine, which are the ones that there are no evil, right? They're pure, purified spirits that are completely good. So those are basic categories. So as you can see, we're in the world that still needs a lot of work. Even if we move to regenerating worlds, that still means we have to fight and fight to accomplish our battles, fight with our internal struggles, go through these challenges and face them and do our best, because that's how we'll keep improving ourselves and improving our planet. And then it continues. Spirits who find themselves incarnated in any world are not bound to that same world indefinitely, nor do they go through all the phases of progress needed to achieve perfection in that one world. When they reach the maximum degree of advancement their world has to offer, they will pass on to a more elevated one, and so on, successively, until they reach the state of purified spirit. These different worlds are stations where the spirit finds the elements it needs for their progress, which are in accordance to their degree of perfection. It is a recompense to ascend to a world of higher elevation, just as it is a punishment to prolong their stay in a miserable world, or to be regulated to another even unhappier than the one they were forced to leave, due to presiding badness. So here it's saying how we're not bound to any one world. So just because we're on Earth right now doesn't mean we're always going to be bound here. If we're advancing more and we're doing good things, we might go to a world that's more advanced, or especially once we completely become better than this world, like say we're not meant to be tests and atonements, and we really get that, then we'll move on to something that's a little bit more purified. Or if we're really resisting this world, we'll go to a world that's less evolved so that we can deal with those situations and kind of realize like, okay, yeah, like I need to get it together because I want to be in a better place. I don't want to be in a worse place. And sometimes and even more evolved spirits can go into these less evolved worlds to kind of help the people at the time. So it doesn't mean you have to be in that category if you're in that world. But for the most part, the majority of people are in the category that creates the level of the planet or the world. So our goal is to keep evolving and to keep doing better and becoming better so that we can move on to better worlds / help the this world that we have become a better place for us to live instead of a place of misery. And if we go the opposite way and we're deviating from the path of good and we're only doing bad things or being stubborn, we might get put to a world that's even worse than the one we're in right now. And then there's the next section, which is titled Earth's Destiny, Causes of Human Misery. Many are surprised that on Earth there are so much badness, so many crude passions, so many miseries, and every kind of sickness. From this they conclude the human species is a very miserable one. This judgment comes from a very narrow point of view of those who emit it, and which gives a false idea of the whole. We must consider, however, that in actual fact, the entirety of humanity is not all on Earth, but only a small fraction of the total. In effect, the human species covers all those endowed with reason, who inhabit the innumerable orbs of the universe. What, then, is the mere population of the Earth when compared with the total population of all the worlds? Much less than that of a very small village when compared to a great empire. The material and moral situation of terrestrial humanity is not surprising when we take into consideration the destiny of the Earth and the nature of its inhabitants. So people might say like, oh, why is Earth so bad? Why are all these people doing all these bad things? But we have to realize that our species is not just the people on Earth, right? We're only a little fraction of it. And we're a fraction that we're in the same level of not being as evolved and having these miseries because we're not evolved, right? We're still learning. And so because of this, we have to realize that we can't categorize all of humankind, or we can't categorize all spirits, because everyone's at a different phase, at a different step. And yes, this Earth has so many cruel passions, but that's because we haven't improved that yet. And we shouldn't lose hope in humanity because we're looking at only a very small fraction. In reality, there's a great empire, right? A great kingdom, and we're only looking at a little small village in that. So we can't judge all of humanity based on this one Earth that we live in and we experience right now. Then it continues. It would be a great mistake to judge all the inhabitants of a city by those who inhabit the lowest and most sordid places. In a hospital, we see none but the sick and mutilated. In prison, we find gathered together all kinds of vileness, baseness, and many vices. In unhealthy regions, the inhabitants are, for the most part, pale, puny, and sickly. Well then, picture the Earth as a combination of a suburb, a hospital, and an unhealthy place, because it is all of these put together. Then it can be understood why affliction outweighs pleasure. For we do not send those who are healthy to hospitals, nor do we throw those who have practiced no wrongdoing into house of corrections. Neither can hospitals and house of corrections be places of delight. So in the same way that the total population of the city is not to be found in its hospitals and prisons, we do not find the total population of humanity here on earth. Just as the sick leave hospitals when they are cured, and those who have served their term leave prison, when a man is cured of all his moral infirmaries, he will also leave the earth environment to go to happier worlds. So it's saying that we can compare this to life on earth, right? We can see that there are places where, like in hospitals, it's only going to be the sick people, right? And it's not going to have great energy. Or in a prison, right? It's all going to be people that have so many vices and have committed so many errors. And it's going to be a bunch of those people. But we can't just define earth as those people, right? Because then there's also the other people that are not in those places. And we also can't make a hospital or this house of correction to become a good place either. But once we go evolving, like they're saying, like a prisoner, or once someone's cured, they'll be out of the hospital. Once a prisoner does their term, they'll be out. And if they're doing their best and improving, then they'll be able to leave that place and go to somewhere more evolved. And maybe in a term of just on earth, we say, oh, now they can go back home, they can go back to these places. But we know that we can improve ourselves so that we can leave this earthly environment to go to happier worlds. So we cause our own misery, right? And we're on this planet because we're at the same level as some of these people, or a little higher, but in general there's this area. But we can't compare this earth to all of humanity. We can't judge all humanity by the few people that we're seeing here on earth, because there's so much more to it. The next section is titled Instructions from the Spirit. Inferior and Superior Worlds. In qualifying inferior and superior worlds, there is nothing absolute. A world is relatively inferior or superior only in relation to those other worlds, which may be above or below it on a scale of progress. So there's nothing saying, okay, this world has to be this evolved, but it's just how evolved it is just based on the evolution of the other worlds. How the worlds that are less evolved than it and the worlds that are more evolved than it. That's how it's kind of placed in this scale. But it goes again based off the individuals, spirits that are on that planet or world. In taking the earth as a comparison, we may get an idea of what an inferior world is by supposing its inhabitants to be similar to the primitive races or members of the barbaric nations. Examples are still found among us today, these being the remnant of the primitive state of this planet. In the most backwards worlds, the inhabitants are, to a certain extent, rudimentary creatures, having human form, but devoid of all beauty. Their instincts have not yet softened to any sentiment of delicacy or benevolence, nor have they acquired any notions of justice or injustice. Brute force is the only known law. Without either industry or invention, they pass their time in conquest of food. However, God does not abandon even one of his creatures. At the bottom of the darkness, intelligence lurks a seed, sometimes more, sometimes less developed, of a vague intuition of a supreme being. This instinct is enough to make them superior one from the other, and to prepare their ascent to a more complete life. For they are not degraded beings, but children who are growing. In between the inferior and elevated levels are innumerable others. From the pure spirits, dematerialized and brilliant with glory, it is impossible to recognize the primitive beings they once were, just as from the adult it is difficult to recognize the embryo. So here they're saying again how these different worlds are different states, right, of evolution. And we see that the primitive states, they can still be found on this planet today, because they're kind of like the primitives that are still here as Earth started evolving more to test and atonements. There's still some primitives that were left, and as Earth goes evolving more, if they don't catch up, then they're gonna just be put to a different world that's less evolved, so they can learn more there. And so there's still primitives on this planet, and as we go evolving more, if they don't evolve, they'll go to a different planet. And as if someone evolves a lot and is way ahead, they'll also go to a different world. Or maybe if a different world would be better for someone to learn, even if it's equal to Earth's status, then they might also go there as well. And so they're saying again, these primitive people, they don't have really it's very simple, right? And like the only law that they really understand is like by force to do things, and they don't have industry or inventions. They're just gathering food. They're just looking for food. But that doesn't mean that God like left them behind. They're just children that are learning, and they will learn, and they'll get more evolved, and they'll move on to a world of tests and atonements. They're not going to be stuck there, as we know. And no matter what planet, have this sense of a supreme being, right? And that is what helps all of us to evolve and to move forward, because we have this instinct of a supreme being. And once we evolve, we're not going to be stuck with that status of we were a primitive spirit. You're not going to remember, no one's going to remember that spirit used to be a primitive spirit, because we all start there, and we all start growing and evolving from there. So that's where we'll leave off today, and next week we'll finish off that section and maybe even that chapter. But before we leave off, I'd like to read our message from the Daily Book of Positive Quotations by Linda Picone for today's date, May 28th. Achievement and Success. My mother drew a distinction between achievement and success. She said that achievement is the knowledge that you have studied and worked hard and done the best that is in you. Success is being praised by others. That is nice, but not as important or satisfying. Always aim for achievement and forget about success. We enjoy it when our work is recognized by others. Our boss tells us we've done a good job. Our friends are impressed by something we just showed them. A teacher praises an essay we've written. This kind of recognition helps motivate us, as any good teacher, parent, or boss knows. But whether we do our best, whether recognized by others or not, the feeling is better than any compliment or collection of gold stars. I celebrate my own work when I know I've achieved my best. If you guys have any questions, comments, anything you want to talk about at all, feel free to email me at cardiacradioforteens@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you right away. I'm Bia, and this has been Cardiac Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening. This has been Cardiac Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.